Irashaimase. Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this Saturday we have Jet Lancer, an awesome new aerial combat shooter. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From publisher Armor Game Studios, Jet Lancer would release for the Nintendo Switch and PCs in the middle of May 2020. Marking yet another awesome shoot 'em up in the year 2020. It's been a great year for shoot 'em up, so many awesome choices, but this is one that when I saw it, I knew I had to cover it. So if you're familiar with Vlambeer's title Luftrausers, you know kind of what to expect from Jet Lancer, and like that title, it's definitely one I can recommend. If you haven't played Luftrausers, I definitely recommend trying that one out, as I recommend trying this one out. Although there is some differences. So diving into the game itself, unlike the title I'm comparing it to, this one is far more story-based. And as you can see here from the main menu, we've got the option for the story mode, which takes us here. You do have a few saves you can change between, so that is a nice feature. Continuing, this is the open world map that we select our missions from. So we pilot this hovercraft carrier around to these various tokens that are highlighted on both our mini-map on the bottom of the screen, and if you happen to have new ones, you can see these pillars of light off in the distance. That's how you track down new missions. These missions will take us into the actual gameplay itself. So the title is relatively story-based. It has this sci-fi, anime-ish inspired story that's a little on the cliche side, at least to this point, but is still enjoyable, especially if you like that kind of storytelling and aesthetic. The gameplay itself, though, is awesome. First off, we've got great pixel art, which is quite different from the 3D exploration that we have on the world map. So the gameplay, we have a multi-directional scrolling, and our ship we can move and turn, we can turn in any of the 360 degrees around us, but we only move in the direction that our thruster is pushing us. So there's momentum, drift, inertia, those kind of elements are at play here. We also have the ability to turn on some nice features like safety. How to go and refer to it. There's a safety feature you can activate for your ship that makes it so you can't crash into the water. Just a nice, fun little feature. In addition to our thrust and the ability to steer, we also have afterburners, so we can move around even faster, though those will run out over time. You'll overheat your engines. And then we have a special weapon, which right now I have homing rockets equipped. And our main weapon, our minigun. The minigun has a couple different ways you can use it. Standard minigun, you have to hold it down to fire, but there are some nice accessibility options available in the game. So here, in the first mission, it actually is giving us a bit of a tutorial. If you will hold down your special weapon, it fires off your charge weapon, which for right now we have a missile swarm. So this particular stage is one of multiple game types that are in Jet Lancer. So this one is a wave-based destroy the enemies combat. The other stage types that we have, there are hacking stages, which I'll show you after this, as the second stage actually is a hacking stage. There's also escort missions, no one's favorite. Boss stages. And protect the city, protect the... similar to escort missions, but instead of protecting another fighter or a ship, you're trying to prevent bombs from falling on a particular target. So you're just destroying the bombers that would be coming in. So once we've completed all the objectives of the stage, we're taken to this score tally, and we're given a grade based off of our performance in the stage itself. The scoring is a little bit obtuse, as there's no real area where they explain some of the scoring, and that does come into play with one of the issues I've had playing Jet Lancer. So moving on from stage 1 and the clear the area type mission, oh, that's the wrong one. There it is. We'll take stage 2 and show you what one of the hacking missions looks like. So in a hacking mission, our objective is to stay close to one of these targets. So it's important to note that gravity and inertia is working against us, so we want to position ourselves in such a way we can kind of just hover by our hacking target. Some ways we could potentially do this. So there's recoil to our main gun, and it's actually possible to equip modules that will even increase that recoil. Maybe using a combination of the right recoil from our main gun in addition to our thrusters, we can hold position and quickly hack the target. So some of the hacking missions aren't going to be that easy. We only had a handful of enemies attacking us in the end, but that gives you kind of an idea of how some missions could potentially go. Some of the later ones, like, definitely increase the difficulty with far more enemies there. So that's just an example of a couple mission modes that we have available in Jet Lancer, and that's one area where it definitely separates itself from titles like Luftrausers, is you've got all these different mission types instead of having the same arcadey style battle again and again, but at the same time we are using the same fighter rather than changing up our fighters like you can in that other title. So here we have this loadout screen, so you can actually see a little bit of the customization that's possible for our particular fighter. We've got the guided missiles, unguided missiles, proximity charge, or armor-piercing shell. Then there's one that I haven't unlocked yet for the special weapons. Various kinds of charged weapons, the rocket swarm, ultra beam, bombs, drones. And then there are all these installed modules which can change the behavior of our plane, giving us a shield if we happen to take damage, evading projectiles, or rather a warning to help us avoid projectiles, mods for the afterburners, special weapon mods. We can also increase the damage that our unguided weapons give, change the kind of dodge or dash that we have, and even different modes for increasing the firepower of our main shot. Really awesome stuff like that. And based off of your payload, you can see that it also gives you a little bit of grade for what kind of plane you're flying. Is it an easy or a hard? Are you more of a generalist or specialist? And then your payload, which you can equip for modules to your ship. In addition to being able to move around this 3D map, if you've already unlocked a stage, you can find it in this navigation screen, which is actually very convenient to hop around. It does take a while to pilot the hover carrier to any of these locations if it happens to be on the other side of the map. The hover carrier is not a very fast ship. We also can see our completion rating here, so I'm 72% through the game, and although I've mentioned that the story itself might be a little bit generic, it's been enjoyable all the same. We've got some it's great to see the kind of modes you have here going through these stages, all the various bosses you can potentially fight, as well as the other stages we have, the ones that are the escort missions or the dogfights. So let's take a moment to fight the first boss you encounter. So we did change up our loadout a little bit. This stage is one of the first ones where our dodge becomes super important. So you've got a couple different dodge types you can use. There's the standard roll, which makes us temporarily invulnerable to enemy shots. And then it's possible to change that up using modules into more of a dash. So one important mechanic that exists in the game, though isn't really explained, is there's a particular scoring mechanic that's related to the dodge itself. As we dodge through enemy shots, for a brief time after that dodge, you're not invulnerable, but you have a moment where your shots will change a different color, and you get a score bonus for defeating enemies during that time. This is important to note, as enemy scores, or rather getting high scores from defeating the enemies, is an important mechanic of the game itself. There's a couple stages that are dependent on you reaching a certain score to progress. In fact, one of the stages, that's one of my biggest complaints and problems that I've had with the game so far, is one of those stages, at least in the original version of the game, the score is set high enough that it's actually very difficult to achieve the target score with almost any loadout. I had to kind of cheese the system using some of the great accessibility options that the game has in order to complete that stage and be able to progress the story. However, they are updating, well, on the PC version they already have updated that and fixed that problem, but for the Switch version, that update is coming, where there's going to be rebalancing of the missions themselves, so it's not quite as insane. So I haven't talked much about the life or health system that is present here in Jet Lancer. So we have 3 hearts displayed in red at the bottom of the screen, and those hearts are our life. If we take enemy shots or hit enemy aircraft, of which is very likely to occur, as there are certain enemies that will even attempt to ram our fighter craft, as that's just the type of ship that they are. They have like it almost looks like a, rather than a typical fighter nose, they've got like one right there. It's got a blade on the front of it, so it's attempting to ram us and deals heavy damage. I don't like those guys. It's just rude. Anyway, should any of those enemies hit us, we'll lose life. But there is a brief window right before you take damage where you can use your dodge to recover from that particular shot. Dodge are also useful at evading enemy missiles, which that was actually a really good example of what happens when you dodge a missile at the last moment. Instead of taking damage, the screen turns green around the edge. So this escort mission is nearly finished. This one's not as bad as some of the aircraft escort missions that are present in the game. But there are some great accessibility options, as I mentioned earlier. So if you go to the settings, there's this accessibility menu where you can actually turn on an invincibility. We can go from an invincibility off to only taking half damage or no damage at all. You can change your evade window. You can change your toggle for the minigun, whether you want to have it act as a toggle or if you want to simply hold it down to fire. There's also the ability to set your thrust and your afterburners to toggles as well. Some really great options for changing up the gameplay and kind of configuring it into something you want. In addition, one thing I do appreciate, you can rebind all your major controls, making it easier to come up with a control scheme that works well for you. So there we have it. That's Jet Lancer, served up for your enjoyment. definitely a title I've had a lot of fun with, minus the frustration of getting past that one high score mission. But once I was able to clear that mission, it's been a far more enjoyable experience, and one that I can highly recommend. There is a fair bit of content here for the price point, so that's also another plus in its flavor. The minus flavors, though, so even though it is being corrected, I still have to note that the balance is just something that initially is quite the challenge. So this particular mission right here, Operation 15, is the one where I was having the most problem scoring the requisite points. You need 60,000 points in 3 minutes, and yeah, that's quite the challenge. You definitely need the right setup and more than just a little bit of luck to achieve that. I would also like if there was just a little bit more options when it comes to our weaponry. There's not quite enough variety to what the fighter can do, at least with what I've unlocked at this point. So my last few modules I've unlocked have provided differences to our shot type, and I've appreciated being able to experiment with those to the point where it's like, with all those shot modules turned on, we're barely like going forward even with our thrusters full on. Just that like heavy of a recoil. So it can actually provide quite difficulty in steering. But it's pretty neat that way. I would have liked to have seen even more of that. Bigger shots, maybe like three ways, or like lasers that we were firing. Stuff like that would have been really neat. But they might not have fit as well with the story itself. So I can understand why it's set up the way it is. But as far as the plus flavors, definitely, like I've mentioned already, there's the overall content that the game has. Quite a bit of missions for what I feel to be a pretty reasonable price point. The boss fights are really great. I only showed you the first one, which by far is the most basic. They get to be pretty neat after that. The next boss fight you'd encounter is one against like a giant serpent, and that one has some really neat ideas as far as the tactics you can employ against the serpent. There's also just the fact that we are unlocking additional modules and content throughout the course of our gameplay. I always love a good shoot 'em up that has unlockables present in it. So, there we have it. A solid recommend from the chef, Jet Lancer, for the Nintendo Switch and PC. Alright, that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for coming out and joining me this week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.